Well, Jeff Fuller with you. Trust you guys are doing well. Jay Fuller Interviews on YouTube. Certainly subscribe to Jay Fuller Interviews on YouTube. Join the Facebook group, Jay Fuller Interviews. We're on Instagram and Twitter, as well as Jay Fuller Interviews. And now we have our podcast on all the platforms, especially the Google podcast platform, as well as iTunes, as the Backfire Podcast with Jeff Fuller of Jay Fuller Interviews. I believe people's stories make our stories better, less ignorant, and more impactful. So make the time to listen to other people's stories and learn from them. Joining us now with a terrific story is Jim Sweeney. Jim, good to have you on.
Jeff, great to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
So I just want to start with basketball. I love basketball. Here in Vermont, it's just fun to see the development over the years with the Vermont Catamounts, and we've had several point guards that were under 6 feet that have done well. And my understanding is that you are 5'11" and 7'8". Is that correct?
Absolutely. I was measured just recently, same height as I was measured when I was a senior in college in 1980.
So is that shoes on or shoes off?
Shoes off.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Hey,
yes.
So where did you grow up?
Trenton, New Jersey, downtown, right near the Capitol building.
What made you choose Boston College?
I went there on a recruiting visit. I immediately, felt at home. I loved Boston. I love the fact that at that time they were claiming there were over 60 major colleges and universities within like a 10-mile radius of the city. And I said, hey, that would be a great place to go to school. Plus, academically, it's got a great reputation. Athletically, the team wasn't that good. As a matter of fact, my freshman year, I think we were like 10-16 or 10-18. And I knew that there would be an opportunity for me to play right away.
And what other schools were you looking at?
I was looking at a lot of the Ivies. I went to Lawrenceville Prep, even though I grew up in Trenton, New Jersey. I didn't go to, Trenton High School or the two parochial high schools that they had in town. I went to Lawrenceville Prep, which has got, just a great reputation. It's one of the top prep schools in the world. I was very fortunate to have gone there. And they're like a feeder school to the Ivies. I think in the history of the Ivy League schools, Lawrenceville has sent more students as a high school than any other high school. So I looked at, Dartmouth, Harvard. I really wanted to go to Princeton, but my teammate was the guy that was recruited over me, Tony Trani. He was a fantastic player. And, I had a lot of respect for Coach Carrill, Pete Carrill, who was the coach at the time. He said, Jimmy, you're a really good player. I like you. You're a great teammate. You work hard. He said, Tony's my guy. He said, I know you wanted to go to Princeton, but use it as fuel or motivation to excel somewhere else. That Princeton was your top choice, and I didn't want you. So what a gentleman to do that. Like, what a great guy.
Oh, it's for sure. And especially when you're young, I mean, sometimes maturity is something only time can teach. Talk to me a little bit about being in high school and obviously playing with some great players that were actually chosen over you for colleges. How did you find your niche, but you really tried to lead? Because I know that point guard position is so important, or at least it used to be a lot more than just shooting threes and not playing defense. But talk to me about being a point guard and leading.
Well, I just always played. So, I kind of grew into a role as a point guard. On my high school team, offensively, I was a guard. Defensively, I was a forward because we had a really good team. All 5 of us went on and played in college. We were state champions in the state of New Jersey. But defensively, I had to bang it out under the boards. And I wasn't even 6 feet tall. But I'm one of these basketball lifers. I'm going to be 63 soon. And I've always played 3 or 4 times a week. And on my off days, I try to lift weights. I do my planks. I go for a walk. And I'm still a gym rat, age 62, soon to be 63. And as a kid, I would play all the time, everywhere. And hopefully I would get a chance to play against, bigger guys at the park or guys that were more accomplished than me. And they're the guys that help you hone your craft and make you better. They knock you down so that you need to get up and find a way not to get knocked down again.
Yeah, we're going to talk about FIMBA in a little bit. You don't just play pickup, but you play at a high level as well. But to stay in shape, were you always good at stretching or icing? Is that something that you've had to learn now, or do you stretch and ice after
I've
you?
really never stretched and I've never iced. I've never taken a supplement. I'm one of these guys that has been very fortunate that has just always been relatively healthy. I've had my share of, popped calves, rolled ankles, strained hamstrings, but I never had like debilitating injuries. Never had a knee surgery or shoulder surgery or anything like that. So I know a lot of people are into the stretching and the icing. I've just never done it, and hey, it's worked for me. Maybe not for
Yeah.
everybody else, but it's worked for me.
Hey, were you number 11 in high school, and why did you choose number 11 at BC?
You'll laugh when I tell you this, uh, because I thought it would make me look taller. I lived with some brothers for life for several years in college, and they were all big, bruising football players. All of them were taller than me, and they would always, and rightfully so, they would ridicule me, they'd mock me, they'd scorn me. I never had a brother, so it's as if I just got adopted by a whole bunch of brothers when I was in college, and they would always shame me for being a lot shorter than them. So that's why I chose number 11. In high school, I was number 42.
Okay. So I chose number 22. So that probably made me look a little huskier or chubbier than I really was, or let's go with that. But I had an opportunity to interview Todd Marinovich lately, who also had a ESPN 3030 about him. And he just talks about how you don't just make it to the pros by having fun. Talk about that work ethic that you had to learn from high school to college.
Well, if you want to be good, if you want to be, great at what you're doing, and you don't necessarily have all the athletic ability that maybe some people were born with. I was athletic. I was quick. I was never fast. I could jump, reasonably well. I was always strong, but when you work, just work physically, you have to work mentally too. And you have to discipline yourself so that you become a student of the game. And I was really fortunate when I was in college in that I had a great coaching staff that I played for. And I also had a couple friends on the team. One in particular, I thought to this day, I thought he was the smartest basketball player I had ever played with. And ironically, he had a learning disability and he was dyslexic and he struggled and he stammered. So people didn't always think that, hey, that guy was all that smart, but he was athletic. And it was just the opposite. I was more athletic than him. Everybody thought I was the smart cerebral player. I learned more in my career from this gentleman than anybody else. And we'd spend time in the gym. Then afterwards, if they're like on the weekends or one night, if there was a game on TV, we'd sit down and we'd watch the games and he'd break it down. And he was younger than me, but he never got into coaching. I thought he would have been an awesome coach because there was a relatability to him. And then there was also a way that he had just this uncanny ability to anticipate things and to be able to, determine like what the next play would be, what the better angle would be. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does. And Jim Sweeney makes up time. And I just want to ask you, how different would your game have been with a 3-point shot back in high school or college?
In both high school and college, I think it would have been different. I would have probably scored a lot more points because I could always shoot the ball. And now, when guys get older and slower and probably lazier, that they don't want to take you off the dribble or go in and get knocked down by some big guy if you take it to the hole. I found that most older players can shoot it well. I think I could shoot it very well now. But back in college and in high school, I was always a really good shooter. So I think I would have definitely have maximized any opportunity I had to take part in the 3-point game.
Yeah. Hey, so we alluded to it, but ESPN did a 30 for 30 playing for the mob. Your name came up. Also, if you are a fan of movies, listener, Goodfellas, it references what's taking place in that documentary as well. Can you just share for those that aren't familiar, or let me back up. When you heard ESPN was doing this documentary, how did that come across your desk, your table?
Ironically, the guy that was the executive producer grew up in the same hometown as me, which is Trenton, New Jersey. We went to rival high schools. He went to a prep school that was 5 miles north up the road of the prep school that I had attended, and we were the exact same age. So he had a fascination in the actual story. We had never known each other until I think it was about 2013. He reached out to me. We started a dialogue. We talked about, my story, the overall story. And the next thing I knew, it evolved into the production of the ESPN 30 for 30 documentary.
And what is the biggest misnomer that you felt the documentary got wrong that you would just like to shed light on?
Well, one thing in particular is there was a gentleman that had stayed with me for about 10 days during my freshman year. The guy's name was George. He was a little bit older than me. He was a friend of one of my teammates. And I thought it was odd that he wasn't employed at the time. He wasn't at school. But my friend said, "Hey, do you think George could stay with you?" And I said, "Sure." I didn't have a roommate because my original roommate got mono and he had to leave for the semester. This guy, George, was like the perfect roommate. But there was always a question I had about him because he was like a rough and tumble guy, had a smushed in nose. And I always had a question mark about him. So when I had met the people, the Goodfellas crew, and then after the Goodfellas meeting that we had at the Boston Logan Airport Hilton, I told my teammate, I said, "I'm not going to go through with this." I said, "I do not want to do this. This is wrong." And eventually my teammate said, "These guys want you. They want you involved." And he said, "You don't want to wind up like George." And I said, "What do you mean, George?" He said, "The guy that stayed with you a couple of years ago." And I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" He says, "Well, he was a part of their crew. He was found dead, shot execution style, left by the side of the road." So there was some research that was done that couldn't really connect the dots as to when this had all happened. I find out after the documentary comes out in October of 2014, I go to a BC football game. I go up every year, get together with my roommates. We go to the tailgate party, get together for dinner the night before. Sometimes we get together for dinner, the night of an afternoon game. I run into two of my college teammates and they said, "Man, Swing, good thing you didn't wind up like George."
Wow.
So that was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, how difficult, how impossible, how dangerous, the predicament I found myself in could have been.
Yeah.
I think there was, to answer your question, another story, the guy that was the lieutenant or the capo in the New York City mob, Jimmy the Gent Burke, who's one of the people featured in the Goodfellas story. He owned a place called the Roberts Tavern, and I believe it was in Queens. Now, he's been long since deceased, but at the Roberts Tavern, just maybe 2012, 2013, they did some excavation work behind the tavern. They found 12 bodies that were buried in the yard underneath the cement. Now, I can't remember if that ever made it into the documentary, but my wife and I, out of curiosity, we watched that documentary on Jimmy the Gent Burke on TV, and she looked at me, I looked at her, and she said, "That could have been your body they were digging up."
Wow.
So right now I could feel the emotion because it's a story and it's a situation that I've talked about, almost nonstop since 2014, since the documentary aired. And, I had the very good fortune of playing old man's basketball competitively around the world. And it's incredible how many people are aware of the story. So they always ask me, "Do you mind talking about it?" And I say, "No, not at all. You might need a little bit more time because it's a complicated story."
So I just have one more question, and that is the name Henry Hill. How does he play into just your, not involvement, but did you know that name? Did you know Henry? And when everything came out that The magazine paid for his story, that all this other information came out. But the name Henry Hill, what does that mean to you?
Well, now it means a lot because he was a part of my life, even though I really didn't know him. I had met him once in a hotel room at the Boston Logan Airport. I'm thinking it's 1978 or 1978. And the next time I had seen him was at a Boston College basketball game. And the third time I had seen him is when I voluntarily testified in federal court in Brooklyn back in 1981, I believe.
Well, that gives me chills, and I'm so glad that you are here with us to share your story and just to share what's taking place. Question: What took place for you after college? Did you try to play overseas? Did you end up playing professionally?
Yeah, I did. I played very briefly in Northern Europe, but organized basketball, professional basketball, wasn't what it has become.
Yeah.
So, I played briefly, came home, moved back to New Jersey where I grew up. I was living in Northern New Jersey. My wife and I got married. I married my college sweetheart. I met her in 1977. We've been married for about 40 years now. So, when I returned home, went to look, to find a job, which was difficult, just like it is for, our daughter's 28. When she went looking for a job, it's the same thing. It's always a challenge to find the right opportunity that's for you. But I'd never stopped playing basketball. I always play basketball.
Well, that's a great segue. But before we do that, I just want to give a shout out to your wife's website. You can see that here on the screen, moraforyou.com. And I heard on another podcast that she's the ambassador of happiness. Is that the correct title? That she's something. I just saw her briefly on screen. And so you're very fortunate, but more.
Oh, without doubt. Yeah. And she is the ambassador of happiness. And she got that. She spoke. My wife is a professional speaker. She's a podcaster, a writer. And she spoke at the inaugural Nelson Mandela Day in her nation's capital a number of years ago. And when they were putting together her bio for the program, they said, "What is your title?" And Maura said, "I really don't have a title. It's just me, Maura." And they said, "But you're so happy. You bring such a great positive vibe everywhere you go." So it was the UNESCO World Center for Peace first coined her the ambassador of happiness, and it stuck. We subsequently trademarked the name, and wherever she goes, she's introduced as the ambassador of happiness.
Oh, that's wonderful. And you guys have been married for almost 40 years. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Congratulations. That's awesome. That's wonderful.
As my friends tell me, I'll kick the coverage.
Yeah. I understand that with my wife as well. Hey, so to transition, this is perfect because I know for me, I went to a small Bible college in Canada, and I came off the bench after, really begging for the coach for some playing time. But I always wanted to play. And when I was a sophomore, I think, in college, we had an opportunity to go to the Ukraine and play. But now with Fimba.net, you get to play all over the world. You're playing for trophies and medals. You're playing with guys that played in the NBA. You're playing with guys that played for their teams or for their countries, representing them on a basketball team. Talk to me about how that came about.
In 2009, I was asked by a gentleman who was organizing the team to play in a Fimba World Championship in Prague in the Czech Republic. And at first I was a little reluctant because I'm thinking, just how good, I was 51 at the time, just how good could other 50-something-year-old players be in other parts of the world? And I'm thinking Czech Republic, okay, they drink beer and they eat pierogies and stuffed cabbage. And then I found out that there were 30-something teams in our age group, in the 50 age group. And I had no idea what to expect. Right behind you, there's a picture. We had won the gold medal, the world championship. We beat a team from all places, Poland, but all 5 of their starters were former Russian professionals. So my first taste with Fimba was eye-opening. It was a big, big wake-up call. I was hooked. And I'm thinking, I'm going to do this for as long as I possibly can. So as a result of that trip in, I think it was July 2009, I've played in maybe 100 different Masters basketball tournaments around the world because I'm a basketball lifer. I'm a junkie. I love to play. And I noticed also behind you, you've got an image of a book that I just released called Old School Hoops, Stories of an Aging Baller. One of the chapters in the book says, I don't golf. I don't play tennis. I don't play video games. And the last time I tried running is when I had hair on my head. So I just play basketball, and it's become my social thing to do because a lot of the places where they have these FIMBA tournaments around the world, they turn into great like traveling experiences, not just for me, but for my wife and for my friends. And fortunately, the teams that we enter into these tournaments, they almost always medal. So we play against the best age equivalent competition in the world. And I need to specify, I'm 62. I don't play in the 45 division or the 40 division. They're divisions that go up in 5-year increments. So I played in 50 to 54, 55 to 59, and now 60 to 64.
And so I want to jump around from the book to FIMBA back and forth a little bit. What came first, that goal of writing a book, Old School Hoops, or having this opportunity with FIMBA that takes you around the world to play basketball with teammates?
When people have found out how many tournaments that I had played in, and because I have a certain amount of visibility on the old man's basketball circuit, it's either called Masters basketball, Maxi basketball, seniors basketball, veterans basketball, or my wife and daughter refer to it as old farts basketball. I speak at different gatherings, or when they have the social parties at tournaments, and people have said, "Wow, you need to write a book and chronicle your journey," because I have a lot of interesting stories to share about different places where I've played, people that I had met, and food I've eaten. So I put it together and compiled this book called, as you can see it behind you, Old School Hoops, Stories of an Aging Baller.
And I want to save it till the end, your friend Mike Raffone. But
Okay.
writing, did that come easily for you with this book, or was that just a process? Did you have a coach as you wrote that? What did the details look as far as getting this book together?
It was actually fairly easy for me to do because I love to write. I was an English literature major. When I was in college, I went to a great high school where, I was schooled and trained, in how to write. And I love creative writing. Plus, my wife is a content creator. So she and I probably edited the book 9 or 10 times. So it's grammatically correct. The punctuation is good. There's proper syntax, all that kind of stuff. And it's like one of these guys, when I text, I can't do abbreviations. I have to type it all out. I have to have the right punctuation in the text. I know it sounds like I'm a little bit nutty, but that's just me. And when I'm on these text strings with my roommates from college and 2 sets of basketball buddies here, and in the text strings, everybody just jokes around. It's really short. And I do these flowery texts with long words. Sometimes I get out my thesaurus before I text it, just so I can bust the stones of my friends. So why can't Sweeney just text like the rest of us?
Because you're not like the rest of them. You're out there playing and doing your thing. And
slowly.
Jim Sweeney making some time. And when we talk about playing at your age and at the Masters level, I did see a picture, I'm not going to put it up, of a former pro that has gained some weight since his playing days. How do you stay in shape? Are you just playing basketball? Do you run? Is there strength training? Does it come down to diet?
My diet is actually pretty good because my wife, she's very diligent and disciplined in the type of stuff that we prepare to eat. Like there's a picture behind you, number 12. I mean, look at that guy. He's in his early 50s. Mark Akers, he played 9 years in the league. The guy number 7 to Mark's left, our right, is Slavko Kutnik. I mean, he's 60 years old. He can still drop step on you and dunk with 2 hands. And he's big, but he's one of those guys that he stretches. He takes ice baths afterwards. He's probably very regimented in his eating habits. But for me, it's playing and watching what I eat. I don't have any potato chips, pretzels, cookies, ice cream in the house because I'll devour it. It'll be gone in one day. And I just don't bring it into the house. It's grapes or melon or yogurt at night before I go to bed.
So with COVID, what does the FIMBA schedule look like? Do you have things in plan or in store for this fall, winter, or are you waiting for the spring, summertime?
Sadly, COVID has impacted our beautiful organization. And the FIMBA organization is headquartered in Argentina, Buenos Aires, Argentina. It's been around since 1991. We have chapters in 47 different countries. Every 2 years, we run a world championship. On the off years, we do a Pan Am championship, a European championship, a Caribbean championship. We're looking to do a Pan Asian championship and an African championship. All that within the last year either got scrubbed or postponed. So it's yet to be determined. We have tentatively scheduled a tournament, and we'll have 250 teams in Paraná, Argentina, at the end of March in 2021. We will have 250 to 300 teams in Malaga, Spain, in late June 2021. And our next World Championship will be in the bubble, where the NBA players played at the ESPN Wide World of Sports Complex. We already reached out to the Guinness Book of World Records, and we want it to be the largest senior basketball tournament in the world. And we're expecting 400 to 500 teams. I realize that's a large gulf when it comes to saying it's not 400, not 410, but 400 to 500. We don't know. We don't know how many people can travel, if they're uncomfortable without a vaccine, if you need to have some type of paperwork saying that you are COVID free. There's so much uncertainty right now. We don't know exactly how the next year or two is going to unfold for us.
There's something about sports that I really enjoy, and I think I learned early on that if you can use a piece of leather filled with air to build connections and friendships, then let's use it. And just a mutual friend of ours is Mark Epstein. He just came out with a book. They call me Pathfinder. I just want to give him a quick shout out. But could you just talk about your relationship with Mark? And now that he has this book, They Call Me Pathfinder. He had you on a Zoom call podcast with Xavier McDaniel and some other relatively big names. Just talk about how basketball's opened the doors for you with different friendships that like Mark Epstein.
Well, Mark is a guy that I guess the infancy of our relationship was birthed back in the late 70s when I was a player at Boston College. We didn't really know each other. We knew of each other, but didn't know each other. And then he reached out to me before the ESPN documentary came out. And he said, I'm on the board of the New England Basketball Players Hall of Fame. Would you be interested in coming up and speaking about the documentary? Which I accepted. And he said, I'd like to nominate you for the New England College Basketball Players Hall of Fame. And, that really surprised me. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm honored. I'd be happy to come up there. So my wife and I spent 3 days up in Worcester and Springfield, Massachusetts, spent a lot of time with Mark, who is very gracious. I mean, just a really good friend. And he's a guy with a giant heart, loves basketball, loves people, loves to see people not just succeed, but flourish in life. So we've maintained a pretty good relationship, I think, since 2013. I'm happy for him. I'm happy for his book. And I was also honored to be a part of his podcast because he had Xavier McDaniel, the X-Man, and also Andre McCarter, who maybe a lot of people might not know. He's late 60s. He was the point guard on the John Wooden UCLA national championships teams. So he played with a lot of USA studs that went undefeated for a couple of years. And he was from Philadelphia. I was from Trenton, New Jersey. I actually told Andre when we were on the call the other night, I said, I went with my CYO team when I was like 10 or 11 years old. We hopped on the train, went to Overbrook High School to watch him play in high school.
That's pretty cool. And as we just wrap up, Jim Sweeney, make some time, FIMBA.net. Make sure you check that out. FIMBA is just like FIBA, but the M is for Masters, FIMBA.net. You have a friend, Mike Raffone. Could you just talk to me a little bit about Mike?
Mike's my alter ego. I had come up with the character a number of years ago, and I felt like there was an alternative to a SpongeBob or a Bart Simpson, but in the sports world. And my goal has been, since I launched this thing, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, is to make it into the #1 brand that transcends all sports. And if you look at the sports world, there really isn't a brand that's a spokesperson, that, or a broadcaster that could report on things in the sports world. You've got Cletus, the Fox football transformer robot, but he doesn't speak, and he's football specific. So my guy, I wanted, to have him as a character that would actually interact with real live athletes, coaches, broadcasters, from his own studio. So my wife and I have spent an inordinate amount of money over the years on animation, on artwork. And I noticed that you have my page up here from Amazon. One of the, I guess, inexpensive and prudent ways to get Mike out there was by publishing books. And I published 25 sports comic books that, I sell on Amazon. And the sports comic books all have different themes. And I'm looking favorite sportscasters, favorite flyers in sports, famous sports royalty. And they're Mike's view of the sports world through his own unique lens. And they all come with comics, and they all have a little bit of a twist. And I know you and I, in anticipation of this call, had spoken the other day, and you said, what is your #1 selling book? And I said, well, it's going to surprise you. It's called Mike's Spiritual Sports Favorites. And everybody takes a pause. You can almost hear their gulping, saying, where the heck is he going with this? And Mike's a funny man. He's witty. He's outside the box, never steps over the line. He's never cursed, never said anything we don't believe of an offensive nature. So Mike's take on Spiritual Sports Favorites is his takes on Amen Corner in golf, Pigeon Heaven, and any sports stadium around the country. The Minister of Defense, Reggie White, one of my favorite football players of all time. So that's the way Mike looks at things. He likes to pontificate. He likes to poke fun at things, all in good-natured humor. And the goal with Mike is to get him on TV or a major network. And I've danced with a couple networks to date. It just hasn't come to fruition. Something to birth this and then actually bring it to a national stage. From what I've learned, just takes many, many years. It's taken longer than I expected. I will never give up on Mike. I was born with Mike, January 3rd, 1958. He was coursing through my DNA.
Oh, it's wonderful. Jim Sweeney, make some time. Thank you so much for just spending some time with us and sharing your story. Where can people find you? I mean, I know you are on some social media. I don't know if you want a bunch of people to add you and then you don't have as much anonymity, but where can people find your writing, find more about you besides on Amazon, looking up Mike Raffone?
Well, I'm an open book. I mean, anybody that wants to reach out, I'll reach out. And I'll communicate. I respond to everybody. I'm not a Twitter guy. On Facebook, I'm easy to find. Facebook.com/James D. Sweeney. Hey, if you want to email me, it's a public address, sweeney@fimba.net. LinkedIn, I'm linkedin.com/n/James D. Sweeney. My Mike character, themike.com, TheeMike, the Mike, as in the long-awaited microphone messiah, poised to save America from a self-induced sports coma. I got all the lines. I could go on for hours.
Well, Jim, we thank you so much, and we wish you all the best. And please stay in touch. And maybe your wife would come on and tell me how to do a proper podcast. But thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
And again, that's Jim Sweeney. Playing for the Mob is where you can find that ESPN documentary, but there's so much more. Fimba.net. Man, it is so intriguing. I love basketball. I want to keep playing. Hopefully I can play until I'm into my 60s. I just have to ice my knees or get better shoes. That's what I'll tell my wife. Just get some better shoes. Jeff Fuller is my name. Jay Fuller Interviews is where you can subscribe. And now we're on Google Podcasts and iTunes as the Backfire Podcast with Jeff Fuller of Jay Fuller Interviews. Thanks so much. You guys have a great day. And make sure you make some time to listen to someone's stories because it will make your story much better, less ignorant, and certainly more